Old woman saves stray dog on highway road. Then comes the big surprise. The November wind howled across the Berkshire Mountains of western Massachusetts, carrying with it the bitter promise of an early winter. Sandra Mitchell pulled her worn cardigan closer as she locked up the Riverside Public Library, where she'd worked as head librarian for the past 3 decades. At 62, she felt the cold more keenly than she used to, and the darkening afternoon sky seemed to mirror the loneliness that had become her companion since losing Tom. 5 years had passed since her husband's sudden heart attack, but some days the grief felt as fresh as morning dew. They never had children, not by choice but by circumstance, and now the endless quiet of her Cape Cod-style house on Maple Street seemed to mock the dreams they'd once shared of a home filled with laughter and love. Sandra's silver streak hair, still holding traces of its original auburn, whipped around her face as she hurried to her trusty Toyota Camry. The car, like her, was showing its age, but remained reliable, a testament to careful maintenance and gentle use. As she settled behind the wheel, she caught her reflection in the rear-view mirror, reading glasses perched on her nose, laugh lines etched deeper than they've been even a year ago, and eyes that lately seemed to struggle more with focusing than she cared to admit. Route 27 stretched before her like a ribbon of asphalt, cutting through the autumn-stripped forest. The late afternoon commute was usually quiet in this part of Massachusetts, where small towns dotted the landscape like islands in a sea of wilderness. Sandra had driven this road countless times, but today felt different. Maybe it was the way the setting sun painted the clouds in shades of amber and rose, or perhaps it was the melancholy song playing on the radio, James Taylor's Fire and Rain, a reminder of easier days when she and Tom would dance in their kit. Scarlet on Sunday mornings, the first signs of trouble with her vision had appeared, subtly street signs taking long to come into focus book pages, requiring brighter light to read comfortably. Her last visit to Dr. Morris had included words like macular degeneration and progressive condition, but Sandra had pushed those concerns to the back of her mind, filing them away with other worries she wasn't ready to face, lost in thought. She almost missed it, a flash of golden fur in her peripheral vision, a desperate movement on the highway's shoulder that made her heart skip a beat. Sandra's foot instinctively moved to the brake pedal, her hands tightening on the steering wheel as she peered through the windshield. There, huddled against the guardrail, was a dog. The sight struck her like a physical blow. The golden retriever, she could see the breed, clearly now stood trembling in the cold, its coat matted and dirty, its eyes holding a look of such profound desperation that Sandra felt tears spring to her own eyes. Without hesitation, she activated her hazard lights and carefully pulled onto the shoulder, maintaining a safe distance to avoid frightening the creature. Further years of working with anxious children at the library's reading programs had taught Sandra the value of patience and gentle persistence. She reached for her lunch bag, grateful she'd only eaten half of her turkey sandwich. That day, the wind had picked up, carrying with it the first few flakes of what the weather report had predicted would be an early season snowstorm. "Please stay put, sweetheart," Sandra whispered as she eased out of her car. Her sensible shoes crunched on the gravel shoulder, and she was suddenly aware of how vulnerable they both were. An aging woman and a stray dog on the edge of a highway as darkness approached, but something in her heart told her this moment mattered, that she couldn't simply drive away and leave the soul to face the coming storm alone. As she drew closer, the details of the dog's condition became heartbreakingly clear. It was a female, her belly swollen with pregnancy, yet her ribs showed through her dirty coat. How long had she been out here? Who could abandon an expecting mother to such a fate? The questions filled Sandra with a familiar anger, the same she felt when she read news stories about abandoned pets or saw the endless stream of sad faces in animal shelter advertisements. "Hey there, beautiful Sandra," called softly, crouching down. Despite her protesting knees, she held out a piece of the sandwich, her voice steady and gentle. "I bet you're hungry, aren't you? It's okay. You're safe now." Now the dog's ears perked forward and her tail gave the slightest wag, but she remained rooted to her spot. Sandra could see she was shivering, whether from cold or fear, or both. Cars occasionally whooshed past them, their headlights cutting through the growing gloom. But Sandra remained focused on the scared creature before her. "I know what it's like to be alone." Sandra continued, her voice barely audible above the wind, "to feel lost and scared. But sometimes the hardest part is letting someone help you." She thought of the months after Tom's death, how she'd pushed away concerned friends and family, retreating into her grief like a turtle into its shell. It had taken Mary, her persistent next-door neighbor, practically breaking down her door with a casserole and a shoulder to cry on to help her find her way back to the world. Minutes ticked by, marked by the steady stream of passing cars and the gradual darkening of the sky. Sandra's legs ached from crouching, but she didn't move. Finally, the dog took a tentative step forward, then another. Her nose twitched as she caught the scent of the food, and Sandra could see her internal struggle between fear and desperate hunger. "That's it, sweet girl," Sandra encouraged just a little closer. "I promise you're safe with me." When the dog finally came, within reach, Sandra could see that her golden coat, though filthy, still held hints of its natural beauty. There was no coal, no sign that she'd ever belonged to anyone who cared enough to provide even that basic necessity. The dog took the offered food with surprising gentleness, eating carefully from Sandra's hand, as if afraid it might be snatched away. As she finished the last bite, she looked up at Sandra with eyes that seemed to hold the wisdom of ages, deep brown pools of hope and fear, trust and uncertainty in that moment. Sandra felt something shift in her heart, a piece of herself she thought had died with Tom, suddenly flickering back to life. "Would you like to come home with me, girl?" Sandra asked softly, slowly reaching out to stroke the dog's head. This time the tail wagged with more conviction, and the dog leaned slightly into her touch. "I think we both could use a friend." Getting the pregnant dog into her car proved to be an adventure in itself. Sandra opened the back door and patted the seat invitingly, but the dog seemed uncertain about the prospect of climbing in after several minutes of gentle coaxing and the last bits of her sandwich. Sandra managed to help boost the dog into the back seat. Grateful for the yoga classes Mary had convinced her to join last spring. "You need a name," Sandra mused as she carefully pulled back onto the highway. In her rearview mirror, she could see the dog had curled up on the seat, exhaustion evident in every line of her body. "Something beautiful. Like you, how about Bella? It means beautiful in Italian. You know, I read that in a book once." The drive home was filled with Sandra's quiet monologue, sharing bits of her life with her new companion. She told Bella about Tom, about the library, about her love of gardening, and her secret dream of writing children's books. The dog listened with what seemed like genuine interest, her eyes meeting Sandra in the mirror occasionally as if to say she understood. Sandra's house, a modest two-story Cape Cod, painted a cheerful yellow with white trim, sat on a quiet street where most of her neighbors had lived for decades. Mary's house stood next door, its porch lights already glowing welcomingly in the gathering dusk. As Sandra pulled into her driveway, she saw Bella lift her head, suddenly alert again. "It's okay. Sweet girl, this is home. Now you're home too, if you'll have it." Getting Bella out of the car proved easier than getting her in. She seemed to sense she was somewhere safe, and followed Sandra to the front door with only minimal hesitation. As they stepped inside, Sandra watched as Bella carefully explored the living room, her nose working overtime to process all the new scents. The house, which had felt so empty for so long, suddenly seemed to come alive with possibility. Sandra moved quickly to the kit, Scarlet filling one bowl with fresh water and another with leftover chicken from her dinner. The previous night, Bella drank thirstily, but ate with surprising decorum, taking small, careful bites as if savoring each morsel. Sandra's first priority was getting help. She called Mary, whose decades of experience with dogs made her an invaluable resource. Within moments of explaining the situation, she heard her neighbor's screen door slam and footsteps hurrying across the driveway that separated